Hello, 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 coaches and leaders. I have Kurtis Hewson on with me, and he is a co-founder or founder. I'm not sure if you work with your wife,
Co-founder. Yeah,
Lorna, co-founder
that's right.
of Jigsaw Learning, and you focus on collaboration, right, with your work and how do we authentically work with real collaboration and not kind of superficial or compliant collaboration. So I'm so excited to talk with you about really what causes impactful collaboration. But before we jump into it, Curtis, I just want to welcome you to the show.
Thanks so much, Becca. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So, if you could just let everyone know what is it that you do in the world of education and leadership?
Yeah, so I'm an educator, former principal, taught at the post-secondary level, and it was almost 2 decades ago now. I had come into a school as the principal, and great school, people that were working well together, but we weren't really collaborating to its fullest impact. And so we began to put some structures in place. It took on a life of its own, and 20 years later, it's what I do full time is work with schools around what we've come to refer to as a collaborative response framework. Our last book came out a couple years ago that shares this framework of how we can lead to really impactful collaboration in schools that is very, very intentional and ruthlessly organizing our people. I'm a big believer that the strongest asset we have in education are people, and how do we leverage them to really maximize their capacity to respond to the needs of students, but to build and support each other along the way. Critically important, and it's the work I do now. I love it.
I also believe our greatest assets are people. So yes, we are aligned in this. And the listeners of this show have heard a lot about the catalyst mindsets, which I know
Mhm.
now you and I have talked quite a bit about it. And so this, talking about authentic collaboration is very near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
And because we can do the behaviors of collaboration and it still not be collaboration. So the first thing I would love to talk about is what is the difference between kind of a like people that are quote unquote doing collaboration, or kind of compliantly or and people that authentic collaboration is happening. What's the difference between the two?
I think, and I've had a lot of time to think about this and to talk with a lot of people, I think it comes down to one word, and it's clarity. I think when there is clarity of purpose
Hmm.
and why we're doing it, and that clarity is co-created. It's not just about a leader being really succinct and a powerful communicator to spread their vision. It's rather, how do we co-create this vision of clarity of why do we meet? When do we meet? What's its purpose? And when we work with schools, we talk about every school needing 4 layers of collaboration
Hmm.
in place and then get really crystal clear on what's the purpose in each one of those layers. What is it that we're doing? Who's involved and why?
Hmm.
And making it crystal clear together, but that we co-create that clarity. To me, that's when we start to see the difference between teams that come together, look at each other and go, what are we supposed to do again
Yeah.
here today? Or is a leader going to come and tell us what we're supposed to do?
Hmm.
Where instead it's, I know exactly why we're coming together and let's go. I know that we're making an impact with the work that we're doing.
Hmm. I love that so much, and I love the alliteration of co-creating clarity with
Yeah.
collaboration. It's yeah, and and with my own kind of work around buy-in versus ownership, right? The distinction between the two is co-creation, right?
Yeah.
If buy-in happens when someone else makes a decision and we are being told to implement that, and ownership is when the teachers are at the table helping to make those decisions.
The tough thing about this from a leadership perspective is one is easier. It's easier
Yeah.
to just say you will
Yeah.
and whatnot. Like that takes less time.
Yeah.
And if can be authoritarian in that, I can say this is what I expect that you will do, but I don't think it has the same value. It doesn't build trust that
Hmm.
you've talked about before. Co-creating that clarity is messy. It
Hmm.
takes more time. It takes more asking of questions
Hmm.
than than creation of assertions. It takes more time, but we get so much further because of it. That's why we talk so much about building a culture of
Mhm.
collaboration that it's how we operate in
Yeah.
this school or this organization. We would never think about doing things on our own when we know that we can have so much more impact when we're doing it together.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it. So, how I guess the first question is, right, when leaders are listening to this and they're like, "Oh no, right? Do I have this compliant uh collaboration culture?" Oh, so many C words. It's making me so happy right now. Or is there authentic collaboration? How can they tell the difference?
Absolutely. So I think one of the easiest ways to be able to tell is would this collaboration be happening if I wasn't in the room? I think that's one of the first things, and I often say for leaders, it's your role to set the banks of the river, put in the clarity, the structures, the processes that we want to be able to have, but then don't try and micromanage the flow of the water. We know without banks, the water is going to sprawl everywhere. And I would say, and I've heard you say this too, we want all of this work aligning to our priorities and our goals. And if we can help with that alignment, great, but then don't micromanage the flow of the water. Let good people do good work. And so I think what we can do as leaders is then create the structures and the processes that create predictability, that when we meet, we know what it's going to look like. We know what the purpose is. Um, we even have things as simple as right at the top of our agenda is the purpose declared of why does this team meet? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? Getting really clear on that purpose. And then as a leader, we want to be in the room to help model, to help support, to help ensure that people are being heard and valued along the way. But we want to get to a place where that would happen whether we were in the room or not. That people see that value and you talk about the ownership mindset that they own that work, which is so critically important for us.
And it makes me think about if we are shifting the culture from a compliance culture to more of an ownership culture, that people will need a transition time, right? That
Hmm.
people will need to unlearn some things, I'm imagining, right? That if people are used to being told what to do, and a leader's listening, like, ooh, I want my collaboration time to not be so compliance based, but to have more ownership. Right. Like let me ask you this, right? When you go into schools and you're helping them assess, is there more of that compliance culture? How do we help that authentic collaboration happen? How do you guide leaders in supporting teams and shifting cultures?
Yeah, so we usually start with understanding what I mentioned before, that there's four layers of collaboration
Mhm.
that we want to see happen in the school in response to our students. And I'm going to give you just a real quick rundown of what this would look like. Our first layer we call collaborative planning. Most schools refer to this as PLCs. They talk about PLCs, where we're looking at data, we're determining what's a goal we want to work together on that we hope will impact all students. We want to have that in place. And as a leader, I want to set the structures for what that looks like, but I can't be in every one of those meetings, nor do I want to. I want to give ownership and um, I want people to feel that they have some autonomy on
Mhm.
what that looks like. Then we have our next layer, and we call this a collaborative team meeting, where we bring together people who may not be in the same PLC team,
Mhm.
but they come into a conversation that is very structured. And we start off with what's a celebration you're experiencing for a student? And then we dig into why did that happen? What did you
Mhm.
do that led to that success? And then we say, Becca, what's a key issue that you're experiencing for a student? Don't say their name
Mhm.
yet. Just what's the issue? And then we brainstorm around, okay, who else has that issue?
Mhm.
This can't be just Becca. And
Mhm.
then what could we do? What do you do in
Mhm.
your classroom? What do I try in mine? And then we come back and say, all right, Becca, for the student you were thinking of, what's their name? Just the name, no story. And what's one thing that you want to try? Now we're getting another layer of collaboration happening. And lots of times we see, especially in high schools, where the math team
Mhm.
sticks with just the math team over and over again. That's
Mhm.
great in your PLC or collaborative planning work. In the collaborative team meeting, that second layer, we want to be able to hear from other people in other disciplines, other
Yeah.
teams. Then our third layer is usually where our specialists are coming together, our special ed coordinators, our administrators to talk about students who need support beyond the classroom. And
Mhm.
then our last layer is whenever we meet about one student and
Mhm.
bring the right players around the table for that conversation. We find through creating that layering, and that's usually where I start with schools, is do we have these layers represent? And let's learn about how we can structure each one of them effectively, because if we do that, we are going to create really robust structures that A, don't allow students to fall through the cracks, but we're doing it in a way that everybody's practice is getting stronger and stronger with every conversation. And we find through this, people start to really understand what's the purpose of each of these. And if each one is working into optimum impact, man, we are going to see so much success for kids. And we're going to build such high degrees of efficacy, both self and collective, that I believe it has an incredible impact on not just what's happening for kids, but for the adults as well.
I love it. When you were talking about the collaborative session and choosing one student and problem
Yeah.
solving around it, it made me think about when I do work around resistance, which is 90% of my work. When I have adults talk about teachers experiencing resistance, I have to have a bit of a disclaimer. And I'm curious if you have some version of this, because when we are intentionally talking about the challenges that we're experiencing, sometimes we fall into what I call the agreement pit. And
Yeah.
what that is when someone shares a frustrating thing around, for me it'd be resistance, right? For these collaborative meetings it'd be like student behaviors. Um, Sometimes when adults are interacting around that, it can be like the yeah, me too situation where it's like this thing is happening and then the person's listening like, yeah, me too, this is happening to me, yeah, this is terrible, right? We agree how terrible they are and how terrible the situation is. And I call it, we fall into the agreement pit versus being solution oriented. So I give them that distinction. Let's not lean into agreement, but lean into being solution oriented. So I'm curious if you have ways that you address this thing that happens.
Yeah. In this collaborative team meeting,
Hmm.
it's very structured and it requires a facilitator
Hmm.
within it. And usually we'll set up and help support facilitators. Usually it's administrators to start or instructional coaches. In time, we could reach a place where we come into the meeting and say, who would like to facilitate today, where we all understand what that looks like. But the facilitation process is really precise. And in time, we start to align our data to this so that I bring a student with a key issue, and in time, it's I bring a student with a key issue based on my data that I've been looking at. And we talk about when we bring that key issue, 8 words or less. And it takes
Mm.
time, it takes practice.
Ooh, that's
It takes practice.
powerful.
Yeah, really, we try and get succinct so that when we say, and we have to come ready with it. There's a pre-meeting organizer that gets filled in so that I can turn and say, Becca, I know you've brought a student. Don't say their name yet. In 10 seconds or less, what is a key issue you're experiencing? Go. And you
Hmm.
share it out. Now, we might have to ask a couple questions
Hmm.
to be able to get it really clear and clarified for the room. And then we say, all right, we take the attention off Becca and say, everyone else, write down the name of a student where you're also seeing that key issue for it. What we find is by not saying the name out loud, the second somebody says, I've brought Darren, it
Hmm.
allows us in the room to go, oh my goodness, I had
Oh,
Darren. Oh
Darren.
yeah, I taught Darren. I taught his mother. It goes all over the place.
Yeah.
Um, by keeping it to the key issue, we say the identification of the key issue, that conversation should be very short and succinct. And in time, people get really used to what that looks like because we want to open up the floor to all right, let's take 8 minutes and just what could we do? Throw out the solutions, everyone.
Mhm.
And we say during that time, there's no judgment. If somebody jumped in and said, oh, I've tried that before, it doesn't work, a facilitator is going to jump in and say, oh, remember, we're just sharing ideas
Mhm.
right now. But we find through this when somebody says, I utilize this checklist in my classroom. Someone else goes, oh, that's interesting. What if we were to do that checklist, but could put it onto an app that the kids could use? And someone says, oh, I have a website that does something very similar like that. And we just share out ideas. But then when we come back and say, so Becca, what's something that you would like to try? And who's the student you're going to try it for? Just the
Mhm.
name, no
Mhm.
story. Now we're moving into action, focus, and people pick something that's in their wheelhouse, something that they're comfortable with when they start. In time, we see people start to stretch, and this is where instructional coaches get really excited in this process because if they're in the room, they're able to offer ideas, whatnot. But then when a person says, "I really like Becca's idea, but I'm not sure how to do that,"
Mhm.
okay, it doesn't happen right away. We need trust and we need safety in the
Mhm.
room. Then the coach, now there's a real purpose for
Mhm.
why is this person coming into my room? It's not because I'm broken as a teacher. It's
Mhm.
because I have an issue that Becca's going to help me along with, and I request it. I think I'd like to try that idea, but I'm going to need some help with
Yeah.
that. And
I
again,
love
it's through a really structured process that we start to, we often find from the formalized conversation, the informal conversations start to
Yeah.
change in the school.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so interesting. I'm curious how leaders unintentionally sabotage this process of building that authentic collaborative culture.
So I think there's a few things that they do. One is they create the space and then they don't take part in the space. And what I mean by that is I've scheduled every team. They have times in here. Here are these different meetings, whatnot. And then they just expect that
Mhm.
it'll happen. Or I showed them once how to do it. No, we need to be in and be part of those conversations, to be asking questions. And I say in that collaborative team meeting space, particularly, I'm not there to take away people's key issues. I'm here to solicit ideas and responses. And there might be some I have as well. I think one of the things we do is we have to be there and participate, but we also have to do it in a way that we're there to ask questions and to reinforce process, not to take everything onto our shoulders or to dominate those conversations of a key issue comes up and I say, Becca, what you should do is no, we don't want that. We want to be able to understand that the room is smarter than any one person in the room. How do you activate the room?
Yeah. 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 That's really great. Like, don't set it and forget it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing too is I think leaders who are not intentional in how they're setting up their structures, their processes, things as simple as when you come into a staff meeting, are there norms established? Do you have a clear agenda laid out? In your agenda, is there connections to your school improvement plan so people understand we're having this conversation because it relates to this goal that we're trying to move forward? Just getting really, really intentional in how you structure things. The one that always gets me is the leader that goes, people are disengaged in my staff meetings, but then you come in and there's no agenda, there's no collective norms or commitments that have been established or even just referred to at the
Mhm.
beginning. There's no timekeepers being put in place, and nothing ruins that collaboration when we think we're having a half-hour meeting that turns into 60 minutes because there's no one um, keeping us together or on time. Again, it's structures and processes.
Yeah, and it makes me think of I've been coaching a group of fabulous group of coaches recently, and I've had a number of them say, Becca, what do I do when when I have one teacher that like takes down the meeting, right? And it's I think a thing to acknowledge a dynamic to acknowledge is people's what's it called? It's like social capital,
Hmm.
right? Like how if the sometime, well, many times actually, we have one or two teachers in a group, not always, but sometimes we have a teacher or two in a group that have a lot more influence than the other teachers. Like if this teacher's on board, the rest of the team's on board, right? Or if that teacher's not on board, they're taking down your meeting and there's nothing you can do about it. And and it's I think something to think about, right? Like, we could have these like beautiful protocols and all that. And I think that can help navigate, especially if someone tends to take a lot of airtime,
Yeah.
right? And just to be aware of, sometimes we need to have one-on-one conversations with folks on the
Yep.
side, like I need to get you on board to have everyone else working towards this common goal. And I'm curious, what do you do in that case?
So there's a few things that we want to be able to do. I'm a big believer that you can't have a team if you don't have norms for the team or a
Mm-hmm.
goal for the
Mm-hmm.
team. We need both of those, and they need to be co-created. So
Yes.
when we can come and say, all right, together, what do we agree we will do when we're working together as a team? Let's name it. And I'll usually walk through a process, and we have a process that schools or teams can use right on our website where I'll have people write down individually, what do you need from the team in order as far as norms that you feel are important. Sometimes I'll put up sample ones so people can take a look. And then we get into partners and together come to consensus. And then we bring together
Mm-hmm.
numerous partners. Like I've done this with school staff teams of close to 100 people where we just kept consolidating to get down. But then when we have a norm like
Mm-hmm.
everyone's voice is important for the meeting, then to be able to say, okay, today we're going to focus on number two of everyone's voice. Everyone has 5 bingo chips. Every time you share an idea, you're going to throw a chip in the middle. Once you've run out of chips, you need to wait until the other people have their chips down. Like something simple, like that's something I might use in my classroom with students. We can also use it with our adults. And again, getting really intentional where if I know one person has is taking up that airtime, and usually
Mm-hmm.
it's with most of the time it's with really good intentions
Mm-hmm.
for the person. I might be say, okay, here's what we're talking about. Everyone jot down a few thoughts that you have. Just take a
Mm-hmm.
moment, write that down, and then we're going to have you turn to a partner and just share what it
Mm-hmm.
is that you do before we start sharing out. And then if I know Becca is the one that takes up that airspace for us, as a facilitator or person leading that, I'm going to say, all right, let's come back and share. Darren, what's something that you or your partner were thinking around this? I'll get really intentional to go to Darren first
Mm-hmm.
because Darren's a little bit, he kind of sits back a bit. He may not jump in. Instead of me saying, all right, who has an idea?
Mm-hmm.
Now I've created the situation that allows for that person to take that airspace. Now, again, we're not saying the person's not valuable or not important, but we can structure
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
conversation in a way to bring others in. I've also found that once we have the norms co-created, it's way easier for me as a leader to have that one-on-one conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not about my expectations, it's about, remember we said everyone's voice is
Mm-hmm.
important. We all agreed that that's there. However, the last couple meetings, I feel like your voice is overtaking some of your colleagues
Mm-hmm.
and really like to ask what could we do to help bring our other colleagues' voices into the conversation?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a harder conversation if we haven't clearly articulated some
Yeah.
co-created norms.
Something I really liked though that you named around like today we're focusing on norm number two, everyone's voice
Yeah,
is important, and here are the chips. I like that your approach to norms is active and not passive.
right.
Most often when I see norms, even co-created norms, that they become passive. Like, oh, well, we created them. Now we're assuming everyone's taking them
There's a
on.
nice poster on our
There's a
wall that
nice
has them written
poster.
down.
Look,
Yeah.
look at that. And it's like active, like the active nature of the facilitator to say, me as a facilitator, I value these norms too. And so, just like a teacher would, right? I'm going to be proactive in having these norms be present than just remember our norms, keep it rolling, or even
Yeah.
just reading through them. There's a more active take, and I love that you named that.
And it can
So,
get to a place where we can say, today, Becca, what's a norm that you feel is important? Let's name it. And then at the end of our meeting, we're going to take just 2 minutes to reflect on how did we do today?
yeah.
Again, just and again, if my last meeting X happened, I
Mhm.
might in the next meeting, let's use norm number three and practice that one because it will help address something that kind of went off the rails last time. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that out loud, but
Mhm.
again, I'm getting proactive. I'm thinking about as a leader, what could I do to
Yeah.
help support the team or the goal we're trying to work towards?
And this is where your work and my work really go hand in hand in terms of when we're looking at if someone is not valuing a norm or upholding a norm, right? Like we could look at catalyst mindsets, like, which of the catalyst mindsets
Yeah.
is unsupported? Maybe they don't think the team would be successful if they didn't speak up. maybe they don't value the change and they just spend all this time talking in circles to avoid actually having to implement a change, right? And so I love that your work and my work actually are wildly complementary
Absolutely.
in that sense. It's really great getting to root cause, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So we have got to wrap up. This has been a really fun conversation. So I'd love you to leave listeners with one thing. What is one thing leaders can do to move beyond surface level collaboration? What's one thing they could implement tomorrow?
Okay, so the implement tomorrow is if you don't have norms for your teams, create norms. And
Okay.
we have on our website, if you go to jigsawlearning.ca/free, we have a number of free guides. One of them is how do you create norms? There's a full workshop protocol with different resources to help with that. Create norms. That would be my first thing to be able to look at co-creating those. And then the second that I would suggest is one is more practical, hands-on. The other is more philosophical, I guess, in a sense, is always coming back. And you mentioned this in a previous conversation we had, is coming back and reflecting on what could I do to help support that person instead of getting trapped in the, well, they're not doing what they're supposed to. Now it's external.
Hmm.
Now it comes back to what could I be doing to help support
Hmm.
the what I would like to be able to see to help us move forward as a team to meet our priorities.
I
Coming
love
back
it.
to
And
what can I do rather
yeah.
than what are they not doing?
Right, right. We take that finger pointing at them and we turn it right back on ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And it's in my language, I say we shift from the shoulds and we're shoulding everywhere to we to support, right? How instead of they should be able to do this meeting on their own to how can I support them in it? So I love that. I love that how aligned we are. So I'd love you to share with the listeners where can they find out more about all of your collaboration work and what you do and even your podcast.
Yeah, so we have a couple different podcasts. We have Leading Collaborative Response, which really digs into the work that I do across schools and school divisions, along with my wife, Lorna. And then we also have a Building a Culture of Collaboration podcast, where we think a little bit broader about what are the attributes and practices that other leaders are putting in place that are having impact on how teams are collaborating in schools. And if you go to jigsawlearning.ca, all of our contact information is there, tons of resources, things that can really help leaders bring out the best in their teams. Becca, I'm a big believer that collaboration does not happen naturally. It's we need to practice and help model it for us. And I think when we can master that within our school, it has so much impact because collectively there's a lot we can do that's hard for us if we're operating as individuals.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all this really all these strategies and thinking around authentic collaborations is really exciting work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Becca, and excited with the work that you're doing as well. I know it's impacting ultimately students, which is what we want to be able to get to. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.